Hi there, and welcome back. You have probably heard the term, there is no such thing as a free lunch. You've probably either heard it from your economics professor or from your mom. But essentially what it means is that it's impossible to get something for nothing. And the reality is we Americans love easy fixes and we love free stuff. I mean, how often have you heard people say, lose weight without exercise or effort? I mean, it's everywhere, and it's really, really rampant in my field of nutrition and health. And this type of mentality is concerning to me because it often leads to risky and even harmful choices. So I'm going to talk with you about two ways in which I've seen recently this become kind of prevalent, this idea that I can get something and it's not going to cost me anything, because it's just not true. So the term calorie banking is probably something you're familiar with if you've been on a diet before or if you're currently on a diet. And it's probably something you've done even if you've never been on a diet before. Calorie banking is essentially saving up your calories for later in the day or later in the week, so you have some wiggle room to play around with. So for instance, if you know you're going to dinner tonight and you really want to go crazy, that means skipping breakfast and eating nothing but salad for lunch. Or if you want to have a splurge weekend, it means you're really good during the week to save up for later. And calorie banking is a terrible idea. It has unintended consequences that you have probably experienced. So the reality is that we need consistent fuel throughout the course of the day. And what happens when we aren't adequately fueling is that our brain really does all that it can to make sure that we get enough to eat. That means we become overly preoccupied with food, and it means we have a really strong primal drive to get that food as soon as we can. This is why when you've probably attempted to save your calories for later, you've experienced maybe feeling out of control, maybe binging, eating in a compulsive way, and at the very least, probably eating too much at the next opportunity. And in fact, even though I've known this anecdotally, and I've certainly experienced it myself, and I've seen client after client experience this, I came across some really fascinating research that I wanted to show you. So a few months ago, back in the winter issue of the Nutrition Journal in 2014, there was this fascinating article that showed that people who eat breakfast have a better time regulating their food throughout the course of the day, and that they experienced fewer food cravings. And the reason this is that actually eating breakfast, especially breakfasts that are higher in protein, really help your brain respond to the chemical that helps you to regulate your food intake, that helps to regulate food cravings. So essentially what this means is eating breakfast actually allows you to have the brain chemistry necessary to regulate your eating in the course of the day. That is amazing. So if you experienced eating patterns that aren't working for you well, maybe they're chaotic, maybe they're impulsive, maybe they're inconsistent, I highly encourage you to get consistent with eating breakfast and see what a difference it can make. And remember, the important thing with this study is that it was breakfast that had some kind of protein in it. And it doesn't have to be a specific kind of protein. It could come from eggs, it could come from nut and nut butters, it could come from yogurt. So give it a try, and I'd be interested to see or hear from you if that's made a difference. I sure hope so. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you today has been all over the news in the past week, and that is Vyvanse. Maybe you've heard of it. Vyvanse is a medication that was recently approved by the FDA to treat binge eating disorder. And this is a really big deal because this is the only medication that is currently approved for treating binge eating disorder. Now, there's some things that I want you to know about this that are pretty important. Vyvanse is actually and has been used to treat ADHD, which means that it's a stimulant, and stimulants can be highly addictive and they can be easily abused. I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about binge eating disorder. Binge eating disorder wasn't acknowledged as an actual eating disorder until 2013. Before that, it had been sort of lumped together in the eating disorder not otherwise specified category. But when the people who write the DSM, the big manual that helps us understand what a diagnosis is and what meets the criteria for a diagnosis, they wrote their newest edition. They unveiled it at this big meeting in 2013 in San Francisco, and binge eating disorder was included as its own diagnosis, which is really exciting and really good news in acknowledging this as a legitimate, serious illness that needs research, funding, as well as some much better resources in being able to treat the illness. And in fact, it is the most prevalent eating disorder out there, with as many as 5% at any time in the United States, people having actually meeting the criteria of binge eating disorder. So one of my concerns with this medication as being treated for binge eating disorder is that it is actually intended to treat the eating disorder, not just someone who feels like they occasionally overeat, or they tend to eat emotionally sometimes, or they wish that they could lose 20 pounds. Now, the outcome of the medication, these early studies that are being done, are relatively promising. They're showing reduction in binge eating symptoms and reductions in weight. Now, that gets people really, really excited. But I ask you to just hold your horses. I'll go through a little bit of the research. One of the studies showed that in the higher dose groups of people with binge eating disorder took Vyvanse, that we saw somewhere between a 40 and 50% reduction in binge eating symptoms. This is very promising. However, it's important to note that 20% of the placebo group also showed improvements in eating symptoms as well. So essentially what that tells us is that simply having the belief that taking something could help improve binge eating was enough to improve binge eating frequency. What we know is that all medication comes at a cost. All medications have side effects, and the most common side effects of taking Vyvanse include gastrointestinal issues, headaches, irritability, and heart palpitations. In fact, a not insignificant number of people who have participated in the research had to drop out of the research because of just a bad reaction to the side effects. So that's something to keep in mind too. But really what I want you to take away from this is that you cannot cure an eating disorder simply by popping a pill. And that's my concern, is that people are going to have that impression that eating disorders are very complicated illnesses, and they really require lots of different tools to treat them effectively and for people to be able to recover. Medication may be one component, so is therapy, so is nutrition counseling. That there are many different pieces to the puzzle that are required to effectively treating an eating disorder, and taking a pill like Vyvanse isn't going to be the only thing that resolves the issue. So Vyvanse, like everything else in life, is not a cure-all. And as the saying goes, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Every choice we make has a consequence. So when I think about the types of choices that we Americans are making as it relates to food and health, I hope you'll think long and hard about the potential consequences of the choices that you're making in your life. Thanks so much for staying tuned, and be sure to visit me again. Thanks.